Hi everyone, I'm Miss Mary Beth. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at Ingalls Memorial Library in Ringe, and I'm here today for Armchair Adventures. And that's our series where every day I read a little bit of a book to you, and eventually we finish a whole book together. And the book we're reading right now is The Princess and the Goblin. And this book was written in 1870, so it's pretty old, but it's a good story so far. I'm enjoying it. It's a story about this little girl who's a princess. Her name is Irene, and this boy Curdy. And there are kind of two stories going on. The one we're on right now is about Irene and this old lady who lives in secret in her house, in her castle. The old lady claims that she's Irene's great-great-grandmother. She seems nice so far, but we don't quite know her story. And she told Irene to come and find her on Friday. And we're about to start one, and it's Friday, so she's just meeting her grandmother again. And in Curdy's story, he's a 12-year-old boy who works in the mines, and the goblins also work in the mines. They live in the mines. And they don't like the king, and they have a plot against him. So Curdy is on a mission to discover what that plot is. But right now we're on Irene's story, so let's see what happens when she meets her great-great-grandmother. This chapter is chapter 15, Woven and Then Spun. "Come in, Irene," said the silvery voice of her grandmother. The princess opened the door and peeped in, but the room was quite dark, and there was no sound of the spinning wheel. She grew frightened once more, thinking that, although the room was there, the old lady might be a dream after all. Every little girl knows how dreadful it is to find a room empty where she thought somebody was. But Irene had to fancy for a moment that the person she came to find was nowhere at all. She remembered, however, that at night she spun only in the moonlight, and she concluded that that must be why there was no sweet bee-like humming. The old lady might be somewhere in the darkness. But before she had time to think another thought, Irene heard her voice again, saying as before, "Come in, Irene." From the sound, Irene understood at once that the lady was not in the room beside her. Perhaps the lady was in her bedroom. So Irene turned across the passage, feeling her way to the other door. When her hand fell on the lock, again the old lady spoke. "Shut the other door behind you, Irene. I always close the door of my workroom when I go into my chamber." Irene wondered to hear her voice so plainly through the door. Having shut the other door, she opened the new door and went in. Oh, what a lovely haven to reach from the darkness and fear from which she had come! The soft light made her feel as if she were going into the heart of the milkiest pearl, while the blue walls and their silver stars for a moment perplexed her with the fancy that they were in reality the sky which she had left outside a minute ago, covered in rain clouds. "I've lighted a fire for you, Irene. You're cold and wet," said her grandmother. Then Irene looked around again, and she saw that what she had taken for a huge bouquet of red roses on a low stand against the wall was in fact a fire which burned in the shapes of the loveliest and reddest roses, glowing gorgeously between the heads and wings of two cherubs of shining silver. And when Irene came nearer, she found that the smell of roses with which the room was filled came from the fire roses on the hearth. Her grandmother was dressed in the loveliest pale blue velvet, over which her hair, no longer white, but of a rich golden color, streamed like a cataract, here falling in dull and gathered heaps, there rushing away in smooth shining falls. And ever as Irene looked, the hair seemed pouring down from her head and vanishing in a golden mist before it reached the floor. It flowed from under the edge of a circle of shining silver, set with alternated pearls and opals. On her dress was no ornament whatever. Neither was there a ring on her hand, or a necklace or a corselet around her neck. But her slippers glimmered with the light of the Milky Way, for they were covered with seed pearls and opals in one mass. Her face was that of a woman of 23. That's odd. Irene was so bewildered with astonishment and admiration that she could hardly thank her, and she drew nigh with timidity, feeling dirty and uncomfortable. The lady was seated in a low chair by the side of the fire, with hands outstretched to take her, but the princess hung back with a troubled smile. "Why, what's the matter?" asked her grandmother. "You haven't been doing anything wrong. I know that by your face, though it is rather miserable. What's the matter, my dear?" And she held out her arms. "Dear grandmother," said Irene, "I'm not so sure that I haven't done something wrong. I ought to have run up to you at once when the long-legged cat came in the window, instead of running out on the mountain and making myself such a fright." "You were taken by surprise, my child, and you are not so likely to do it again. It is when people do wrong things willfully that they are more likely to do them again. Come." And still she held out her arms. "But grandmother, you're so beautiful and grand with your crown on, and I am so dirty with mud and rain. I should quite spoil your beautiful blue dress." With a merry little laugh, the lady sprung from her chair, more lightly far than Irene herself could, caught the child in her chest, and kissing her tear-stained face over and over, sat down with Irene in her lap. "Oh, grandmother, you'll make yourself such a mess," said Irene, clinging to her. My darling, do you think I care more for my dress than for my little granddaughter? Please, besides, look here. And as she spoke, she set her Irene down, and Irene saw to her dismay that the lovely dress was covered with the mud of her fall on the mountain road. But the lady stooped by the fire, and taking from it, by the stalk in her fingers, one of the burning roses, she passed it once and again and a third time over the front of her dress. And when Irene looked, not a single stain was to be discovered. There, said her grandmother, you don't mind coming to me now. But Irene again hung back, eyeing the flaming rose which the lady held in her hand. You're not afraid of that rose, are you? She asked, about to throw it onto the fire again. Oh, don't, please, cried Irene. Won't you hold it to my frock and my hands and my face? And I'm afraid that my knees and feet want that rose too. No, answered her grandmother, smiling a little sadly as he threw the rose from her. It is too hot for you yet. It would set your frock in a flame. Besides, I don't want to make you clean tonight. I want your nurse and the rest of the people to see you as you are, for you will have to tell them how you ran away for fear of the long-legged cat. I should like to wash you, but they would not believe you then. Do you see that bath behind you? The princess looked and saw a large oval tub of silver shining brightly in the light of the wonderful lamp. Go and look into it, said the lady. Irene went, and came back very silent with her eyes shining. What did you see? Asked her grandmother. The sky and the moon and the stars, Irene answered. It looked as if there was no bottom to it. The lady smiled a pleased, satisfied smile, and was also silent for a few more minutes. Then she said, Any time you want a bath, come to me. I know you have a bath every morning, but sometimes you want one at night too. Thank you, grandmother. I will indeed, answered Irene, and she again went silent for some moments thinking. Then she said, How was it, grandmother, that I saw your beautiful lamp? Not the light of it only, but a great round silvery lamp itself, hanging alone in the open air, high up. It was your lamp I saw, wasn't it? Yes, my child, answered her grandmother. It was my lamp. Then how was it? I didn't see a window all around. When I please, I can make the lamp shine through the walls, shine so strong that it melts them away before the night, and shows itself as you saw it. But, as I told you, not everybody can see yet. How is it that I can, then? I'm sure I don't know, answered Irene. It is a gift born with you, and one day I hope everybody will have it. But how will you make it shine through the walls? Ah, that you would not understand if I were to try ever so much to make you. Not yet, not yet. But, added the lady, rising, you must sit in my chair while I get you the present I have been preparing for you. I told you my spinning was for you. It is finished now, and I am going to fetch it. I have been keeping it warm under one of my brooding pigeons. Irene sat down in the low chair, and her grandmother left her, shutting the door behind her. The child sat gazing now at the rose fire, now at the starry walls, then at the silver light. And a great quietness grew in her heart. If all the long-legged cats in the world had come rushing at her then, she would not have been afraid of them for a moment. How this was she could not tell. She only knew that there was no fear in her, and everything was so right and safe that it could not get in. She had been gazing at the lovely lamp for some minutes fixedly. Turning her eyes, she found the wall had vanished, for she was looking out into the dark, cloudy night. But though she heard the wind blowing, none of it blew upon her. In a moment more the clouds themselves parted, or rather vanished like the wall, and she looked straight into the starry herds, flashing gloriously into the dark blue. It was but for a moment. The clouds gathered again and shut out the stars. The wall gathered again and shut out the clouds. And there stood the lady beside her with the loveliest smile on her face and a shimmering ball in her hand, about the size of a pigeon's egg. There, Irene, there is my work for you, she said, holding out the ball to the princess. She took it in her hand and looked it all over. It sparkled a little, and shone here and there, but not much. It was a sort of gray whiteness, something like spun glass. Is this all your spinning, grandmother? She asked. And since you came to the house. There is more than you think. How pretty it is! What am I to do with it? Irene asked. That I will explain to you, answered the lady, turning from her and going to the cabinet. She came back with a small ring in her hand. Then she took the ball from Irene's, and did something with it too, but Irene could not tell what she did. Give me your hand, the lady said. Irene held up her right hand. Yes, that is the hand I want, said the lady, and she put the ring on the forefinger of it. What a beautiful ring, said Irene. What is the stone called? It is a fire opal, the lady answered. Please, am I to keep it? Irene asked. Always, said the grandmother. Oh, thank you, grandmother. It's prettier than anything I ever saw except those, of all colors, in your... Please, is that your crown? asked Irene. Yes, it is my crown, answered the lady. The stone in your ring is of the same sort, only not so good. It has only red, but mine has all colors, you see. Yes, grandmother, I will take such care of it, but, she added, hesitating. But what? Asked her grandmother. What am I to say when Ludi asks me where I got it? You will ask her where you got it, answered the lady, smiling. I don't see how I can do that, answered Irene. You will, though, said the lady. Of course I will, if you say so, but, I can't pretend not to know, answered Irene. Of course not, but don't trouble yourself about it. You will see when the time comes. So saying, the lady turned, and she threw the little ball into the rose fire. Oh, grandmother! Exclaimed Irene. I thought you had spun it for me. So I did, my child, and now you've got it. No, it's burnt in the fire, said Irene. The lady put her hand in the fire, brought out the ball, glimmering as before, and held it towards Irene. Irene stretched out her hand to take it, but the lady turned, and going to her cabinet, opened a drawer and laid the ball in it. Have I done anything to vex you, grandmother? Said Irene pitifully. No, my darling, but you must understand that no one ever gives anything to another properly and really without keeping it. The ball is yours. Oh, I'm not to take it with me? You're going to keep it for me? You are to take it with you. I've fastened the end of it to the ring on your finger. Irene looked at the ring. I can't see it there, grandmother, she said. Feel, a little way from the ring, towards the cabinet, said the lady. Oh, I do feel it, exclaimed the princess. But I can't see it, she added. No, the thread is too fine for you to see it. You can only feel it. Now you can fancy how much spinning that took, although it does seem such a little ball. But what use can I make of it if it lies in your cabinet? That is what I will explain to you. It would be of no use to you. It wouldn't be yours at all if it did not lie in my cabinet. Now, listen. If ever you find yourself in any danger, such, for example, as you were in this same evening, you must take off your ring and put it under the pillow of your bed. Then you must lay your forefinger, that same that wore the ring, upon the thread, and follow the thread wherever it leads you. Oh, how delightful! It will lead me to you, grandmother. I know! Yes. But remember, it may seem to you a very roundabout way indeed, and you must not doubt the thread. Of one thing you may be sure, that while you hold it, I hold it too. It is very wonderful, said Irene. Then suddenly, becoming aware, she jumped up, crying, Oh, grandmother, here I have been sitting all this time in your chair, and you standing. I beg your pardon. The lady laid her hand on her shoulder and said, Sit down again, Irene. Nothing pleases me better than to see anyone sit in my chair. I am only too glad to stand so long as anyone will sit in it. How kind of you, said the princess, and sat down again. It makes me happy, said the lady. But, said Irene, still puzzled, won't the thread get in somebody's way and be broken, if one end is fast to my ring and the other is laid in your cabinet? You will find that all will arrange itself. I'm afraid it is time for you to go now. Mightn't I stay and sleep here tonight, grandmother? No, not tonight, she answered. If I had meant you to stay tonight, I should have given you a bath. But you know everybody in the house is miserable about you, and it would be cruel to keep them up all night. You must go downstairs to let them know you're safe. I am so glad, grandmother, you didn't say go home, for this is my house. Mayn't I call this my home? You may, my child, and I trust you will always think of your home. Now come, I must take you back without anyone seeing you. Please, I want to ask you one question more, said Irene. Is it because you have your crown on that you look so young? No, child, answered her grandmother. It is because I felt so young this evening that I put my crown on. And I thought you would like to see your old grandmother in her best. Why do you call yourself old? You're not old, grandmother. I am very old indeed. It is so silly of people. I don't mean you, for you are such a tiny and couldn't know better. But it is so silly of people to fancy that old age means crookedness and witheredness and feebleness and sticks and spectacles and rheumatism and forgetfulness. It is so silly. Old age has nothing whatever to do with all that. The right old age means strength and beauty and mirth and courage and clear eyes and strong painless limbs. I am older than you are able to think, and look at you, grandmother, cried Irene, jumping up and flinging her arms about her neck. I wouldn't want to be silly again, I promise you. At least, I'm rather afraid to promise. But if I am, I promise to be sorry for it. I do. I wish I were as old as you, grandmother. I don't think you are ever afraid of anything. Not for long, at least, my child. Perhaps by the time I am 2,000 years of age, I shall, indeed, never be afraid of anything. But, I confess, I have sometimes been afraid about my children. Sometimes about you, Irene. Oh, I am so sorry, grandmother. Tonight, I suppose you mean. Yes, a little bit tonight. But a good deal when you had all made up your mind that I was a dream, and no real great-great-grandmother. You must not suppose I am blaming you for that. I dare say you could not help it. I don't know, grandmother, said the princess, beginning to cry. I can't always do myself as I should like, and I don't always try. I'm very sorry. The lady stooped, lifted Irene in her arms, and sat down with her in her chair, holding her close. In a few minutes, the princess had sobbed herself to sleep. How long she slept, I do not know. When she came to herself, she was sitting in her own high chair at her nursery table, with her doll's house before her. And that was the end of chapters 15. And that's where we'll stop for today. So what do you think of the grandmother? Do we like her? She seems to want good things for Irene. She takes care of her, so that's nice. I don't know. I'm very curious. We'll find out tomorrow when you join me for more Armchair Adventures. Thanks for reading with me.